told you guys there's a lot to know about typography. There's a lot I didn't cover last time, and I think you all would be better fulfilled as human beings if you knew it. So I'm making part 2. I could probably make up to part 100, but let's just see how this one goes first. Wait, you haven't seen part 1 yet? Well then, just click on my face. Okay, we're all good? We've seen part 1? Well then, let's go do some learning. My god, I'm such a nerd. I went through it kind of quickly last time, so let's talk more about typeface classifications. Basically, you've got your serifs and your sans serifs, which literally means without serifs. Within the serifs, you've got the old styles, such as Garamond, which were designed to imitate the handwriting of Renaissance Italian scholars. Designed a bit later are the transitional typefaces, such as Baskerville. There's a greater contrast between the thin and the thick strokes, and the serifs are thin and flat. Then there are the modern typefaces like Bodoni, in which the thin and the thick strokes have a much greater contrast. And finally, slab serifs, such as Rockwell, are characterized by their thick, blocky serifs. So now, let's move on to display type. You've got your scripts, which is pretty self-explanatory. The best script typefaces have multiple versions of each character so that it's not quite so obvious that it's a font. Blackletter is a style of writing that has a long, rich history that I'm not going to get into here, but these days it's mostly just used for display type. And most of the other decorative typefaces just kind of get grouped together. These should really only be used in large sizes for things like headlines and titles. Okay, now that we've got that, let's talk about the difference between free fonts and complete font families. There's a really good article that I linked below, so check that out, but I'll summarize it here. Basically, free fonts just aren't as well drawn as the ones made by professionals, and if you're designing something with a lot of copy, you will be able to tell. Plus, free fonts usually only include the basic character set and only 1 or 2 weights. If there's no italic and bold styles included, you become forced to use faux italic and bold, which just doesn't look nearly as good as when they're drawn by an actual person. Plus, if you're designing something like a magazine, using different weights of the same family looks way more cohesive than just picking a whole bunch of random different fonts. Still with me? Let's keep on going. We've been talking a lot about letters, but what about those pesky little buggers called numbers? You have 2 types, old style figures and lining figures. Old style figures have ascenders and descenders, and you use them in large blocks of text so that the numbers don't stick out awkwardly. Lining figures are probably what you're more used to seeing, and they work better in spreadsheets where everything needs to line up evenly. Now you've got your small caps. These are capital letters that are the same height and weight as lowercase letters. They're used in blocks of text, so in all caps where it doesn't stick out awkwardly, or used when an additional type style is needed. You don't want to fake small caps by just lowering the point size because the thinner weight that you'll end up with will seem off balance from the rest of the letters. Okay, now it's time to learn about widows and orphans. No, not Harry Potter. An orphan is a word that ends up lonely and by itself at the end of a paragraph, while a widow is a word that ends up lonely and by itself at the top of a column. They're just really awkward to look at, so just don't have them. And finally, this is probably really obvious to a lot of you, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't know it. The best way to make your layouts look more professional is to make a grid and to stick to it. As soon as things begin to line up and have a rhythm and consistency, it's just so much nicer of a design. Honestly though, even if you watch this 10 times and you memorize every word I've said, the best way to learn it is to put on your Nike shoes and just do it. That was a joke. I don't actually care what kind of shoes you wear. The great thing about taking a class is that you get specific projects and critiques so that you learn what works and what doesn't work. Though hopefully not the type of critiques I talked about in my last video. You just have to keep experimenting and practicing, and eventually you'll develop an eye for what is successful and what isn't. Or if you're just not interested at all, leave it to the professionals and just help us spread our anti-Comic Sans and anti-Papyrus gospel. Alright, what about Adam? Want to send us off?
Stay awesome, and my typography tip is don't overuse your favorite fonts. Helvetica may be pretty, but it's starting to get overrated.
Until you watch the Helvetica movie, because it's awesome.